Alrighty, we're going to be working on making a tic-tac-toe block with a marble cover and some kind of back game, and this is the back game we're going to do together. Typically, I let you guys design the back game. This is the easiest one, I think. It is a back game where you basically play Chinese checkers, like you might see at a Cracker Barrel. So let's go and see how we make this. So the next step is we're going to measure out from the board what we want to cut. So we're going to measure out two pieces that are 11 inches long. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to measure from the end 11 inches, make a mark, and I'm just going to use my square here and make that mark on the board. So 11 inches, I'm going to make that cut, and right, to cut it, we got to put it in the vise. Got to grab our saw. We got to get to sawing. And you just got to do that twice. All right, now that we got our two blocks cut out, we're going to go glue them together. All right, once we're ready to glue it together, you put some glue on your boards. It does not have to be an excessive amount of glue. I usually have this problem where people will put too much. It's a just enough kind of thing. If you get too much, it's going to ooze everywhere. If you do not get enough, you will not get good coverage, and we could run out of clamping pressure. From this point, you can spread it around with a piece of scrap wood. I'm just going to use my finger. Here, make sure I got good coverage pretty much all around, especially when we're looking at the edges. So spread the glue around. If I feel like I need more, I can add more. I'm just going to put a little more in here, especially right around the middle area. But it's pretty good coverage, and once I clamp it in, we're going to squeeze that glue so we don't have to worry. And then if you did use your finger like I did, which I should have wore gloves, but I didn't, I can just wipe it off on my piece over here. And I'm just going to put this in to the vise I have right here. Let's move this over so you can look at the vise. And then very important, when we are clamping it into the vise, we want to make sure that we line the vise with paper, like so. We're going to squeeze it tight in the vise. Trying to keep it as level as possible. We're going to squeeze it nice and tight. And then because the vise squeezes the bottom, the top gets pinched here a little bit. I'm just going to come up to the top here, parallel clamp. I'm going to tighten this up. So we're going to leave this to glue. It's going to be at least a half hour to get it glued nice. And when that's done, we'll come back and go to the next step. All right, so now that I got my block all glued up, what we want to do is we want to take one edge of the block and we want to run it through this machine right here called a jointer. So the jointer you're always going to feed through in the one direction, over the blades all the way through, which I'm going to do now. So let me point this at the jointer right here, and we're going to run the one edge through the jointer to make it nice. Okay, so that gives us our nice flat edge, and all of our other cuts are going to be based off of that flat edge. So this was the jointer. So the next part of the project is we're going to come over here to the table saw, and I'm going to adjust the fence. I'm going to take that nice edge I got from the jointer, and I'm going to rip this down to 4.5 inches. Okay, so first thing I got to do is I got to set the fence to that 4.5 inches, and then once that is done, I am going to rip it down. So now I've got a piece of wood that is 4.5 inches wide, and I can cut it into our 2 halves for our project. All right, so before I'm able to actually cut this is the part of the project where if you're working in a group of 2, we take the project and we separate it into 2 separate pieces. So that's what I'm going to do now. So to do that, I'm going to find the center, and I like to find the center by drawing a big X. So I'm going to go grab a piece of wood and do that. All right, let's get this in the frame, and I'm just going to take a big piece of wood, and on the corners I'm going to draw an X. Now I draw it nice and light. You don't want to go heavy because you're going to have to sand this later, but I'm drawing an X right through there. Then I can take my square on either end, and I can make a cut with it. Okay, so now this is going to be our first cut, and then we're going to come back and we're going to measure the other sides and make sure they're correct. All right, the next step, we're over here at the miter saw. I'm going to lay my wood down right on the cut line to make sure it is correct, and then I will cut it. So I'm just going to move the camera to the other side here, so I have room to grab, and from right here we are going to cut right on that mark. All right, so now we got our 2 blocks. Each partner can go their separate ways, and I'm just going to focus on this one. Now, once we have our 1 block, the important thing we want to do is first make sure that it is in fact square, because that's very important. So I've got my square on here. The fence looks true. I've got no gaps, so it is square. Next thing is I've got to cut off this end to make an actual square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure over 4.5 inches and make a mark. I'm just verifying that this is in fact 4.5 inches. It looks like it might be a little proud off the table saw, so I'm just going to keep that in mind. I'm going to go to that 4.5 inch mark and make a line. I'm going to just double check that it is in fact 4.5 inches. It is, and there you have it. We're going to go back to the chop saw, and we are going to cut on that line. All right, so back over here at the miter saw, I have my block. I'm going to come right over here, and I'm going to cut it wherever you happen to measure on that line. So once we have that measurement, that's it. I'm going to go right up. I'm going to put the teeth on the outside of the line, so the line will still just barely be visible. And cut that out, and that gives us our 4.5 by 4.5 tic-tac-toe block. So from here we got to do some layout. All right, so when you got your block all set, you're going to want to punch your initials in it with the letter number punch set. So this is pretty easy to do. I am DB, so I'm just going to take it right here in the middle on the side that is not end grain. So don't do it on the end grain. I mean, you could. But I'm going to go right here and do a D. 1 tap. I'm going to put a B right next to it. B. And then I would tell you to put your period number in there. I have no class period 5, so I'm going to do DB5. That way I know if anyone tries to steal it. I have no class period 5. There you go, DB5. You stamp yours, you can do 3 initials. The one thing I'm going to tell you is, like, don't hammer it in too hard. 1 tap is all it takes. And this will ensure that hopefully no one will steal your project, and if they do, it's very hard to sand this out. All right, so let's talk about layout. When we're doing the layout on the tic-tac-toe, first we got to verify that we got a 4.5 inch block on all sides. Very important. Here, so I verified that everything looks good. Looks like this one end, the last one on the chop saw, maybe slightly out of square. We're going to have to live with that, but it is very close. So this is the one end. If you got one end that isn't perfectly square, that'd be the one to avoid making marks on. So I'm going to make sure all my marks are going to be made off of these ends to keep it as square as possible. Okay. What I want to do is I want to make 1.5 inch lines to any of these sections. So I could measure 1.5 inch, or I could know that my square is 1.5 inch, and I can use that 1.5 inch square here to just make my tic-tac-toe lines, and I don't have to worry about measuring then. So that is one nice trick we've got here, is that the square itself is actually 1.5 inches. I can just come in here with the square, trying to do this so got good visibility, and we can make each of these 1.5 inch tic-tac-toe lines. Okay, so we've got our grid laid out. It's very important. Now I'm going to adjust the camera to do the next bit. So now that I got the tic-tac-toe grid laid out, what I want to do is I want to actually find the center of each square. And there's two ways to do this. There's a kind of faster and a slower way. So I always say what I do usually. If I look at this, I'm going to make a line straight through the middle, like this, nice and light, because this is going to get erased eventually. So I'm going to make a line straight through the middle and X just this way, and hopefully all the corners will meet and the X will meet. And if you are square, this is how it's going to happen. So I got my X. And then from that X, I can take my square and I can kind of make little marks on these two. So these will be the centers of these two squares. Now I'm just marking the centers. And then I can pick any corner, and I can make an X in any corner. So from there, I should be able to run all the way around my object with my square here, like this. And if I go all the way around the object, it should get me back to the same spot. And all of these places I'm doing this are going to be the center. Now, if you don't like doing this runaround method that I like to do, what I would suggest for you is that you just make an X in the center of each box and then go ahead and check at the end that you are in fact lining up. So I've got the center of each box marked out here wherever the lines cross, and I'm just going to come in with this scratch awl. I'm just going to give them a little tap. Not a big tap, just a little tap with scratch awl and hammer to help when I go to drill them in a few minutes. All right, so we've got our tic-tac-toe grid all laid out. Okay, so whether you're doing the drilling next or the cutting of the grid lines next, doesn't matter. Either order is fine. But with the drill press, I have these drill presses set with a 1/2 inch bit, and they have a stopper. So you're just going to go all the way down to the bottom of the drill. You're also going to make sure you're holding and rotating on the outside, not bringing your hand in closer. Like we would not drill this hole here. We would turn the block around and we would drill it like this. So always as far away as possible from the drill bit. Okay, so there's our tic-tac-toe holes. Let's move on to the next step where we're going to cut these grid lines. All right, the next step is we're going to go to what is called a miter saw. It is in a miter box. It's a hand one. We're just going to take our blocks and we're going to feed them in here right on our layout line, and we're going to put that right across the miter block. I'm going to suggest you clamp them in. And the big thing you want to worry about here is you want to saw it nice and even. One of the things people do is they will rock one side or another. And if you do that, you're not going to get consistent lines. Also, when you're sawing this, we want our lines to be consistent. So I tell people, if you look at the teeth of this saw, you just want to go basically to where the sun don't shine no more. So you bury the teeth in. Once they're all buried at an even level, you're good. So I'm going to just speed through this, probably hyperlapse it, and I'll show you the finished product. All right, so this is the final product after all of the lines have been cut. They're all at approximately the same depth. I look at it from the side, and from here we kind of moving on to sanding and drilling our holes for the final. Okay, our final drill assignment is going to be on this drill press. We do want to try to drill with the grain. I think it looks nicer if we go with the grain, so right into the end grain of our board, and we're going to just drill straight into that. I've got this set up with a stopper, so it's going to go all the way down, and it's also set up so we are going to be able to go left and slide it over right. Do not flip it around, or vice versa. You will be able to just hold it with your hand. That shouldn't be an issue. And I'm actually going to move the camera to the other side. One thing you do want to do is when you're drilling, you want to go down a little bit, come out and clear the chips. Go down a little more, clear the chips, go down all the way and clear the chips. We should have at least 3 chip cleanouts for this. All right. Let's go to this side. There you have it. We got our 2 holes. They're lined up with each other. The last thing you would have to do with this is make a cover that we're going to put on there, and then we're talking sanding and rounding of the edges. Okay, so once you've got your front all laid out, you want to do your back game. Now, I always do the back game making sure that whatever it is, if it's got an orientation, it's going up toward our holes. So there are several back games you can do. I'm just going to do an example of one really quickly, which is a pyramid game, where you would jump kind of like a Chinese checkers. And the layout of this, if this is what you choose, and I will attach a drawing with the video, the layout comes up, and every 3/4 I'm going to make a mark, 3/4 there, go another 3/4 here, go another 3/4 here, and the final 3/4 here. And I'm just going to make lines across each of those spots. So 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines, put the square over here, 4 lines, and then 5. And to get that pyramid shape I want for this, I am going to measure in from each end 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch in from each end, 1/2 inch. I'm just going to connect that to the middle of the top. And the middle of the top should be 2 1/4. And a good way to check is to measure from both sides. And then if it lines up, you are perfectly centered. So here we go. I'm going to go from the bottom to the top mark, right there, and right there. So there's my pyramid. And then what we do is we transfer lines down by skipping one. So I've got a line here. That's going to be a hole. Skip one, line here. Skip one, line here. Go to the next line down. Going to have a hole right here. I'm going to skip one, go down. Same thing on the other side. A hole right here. I'm going to skip one, going to come down. I'm going to go down to the 3rd line. Going to have a hole right here. I'm going to skip one and go down. And that'll be it. I don't have to do it for the 4th line because there's no line to skip. So everywhere I've got this, I can make a mark with my scratch awl to help with the drilling process. So I'm just going to come in here, make my scratch hole mark, and then we can go to the drill press and drill. All right, back over here at the drill press. I'm just going to drill these holes quick, and then we'll get on to finishing work. All right, so there we go. We got our back game. So at this point, we got everything pretty much drilled, laid out, and ready to go. All we got to do is the finishing. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to take a file, and I'm just going to round over all the edges slightly. I'm going to use my vise here to help me with that. And then when I get done with that, we're going to sand the whole board with 100 grit, and then 200 or 220 grit. And when that is done, we will move on to finishing. And there you go. After much sanding, we're ready to move on to the finishing step. All right, the final step here is we're going to hang our project up, and we're just going to paint the finish on it. Now, you do not have to paint the finish on it while it's hanging. You can paint it right in front of the face like so. We're using water-based polyurethane, so you just want to do nice light coats. Try to spread it out. It will get in the holes and it will drip. So you can come back at the end with a paper towel to wipe it off. But really what's important, especially in these first 2 or 3 coats, is just to get good coverage, especially like on the end grains. And we're going to do this about 5 times. I'll just film the one. And then in between coats, you would want to sand. So we're going to put like 3 to 4 coats on here. In between each coat, you're going to sand. And when you get done, you should get a nice, shiny project. Make sure you don't leave any brush hairs in there. I'm going to come back in, get any of these drip marks with the paper towel when I turn off the camera. Make sure I'm getting inside all the holes. You do not want to go down these holes, though. We're going to leave them kind of as they are. I'm just going to hang this up to finish that top there. So I'm just going to come in, get the top here, and I will touch up the final things. What I'm using to hang it is just a regular old wireframe hanger. I just cut it up, as I did with many of them, and I use it around the edges. So I'm just coming here around all the edges here, and while you're waiting for it to dry, you can go work on your cover. All right, so that's 1 coat down. Like I said, in between coats, make sure you sand, and you will be all good to go. 5 coats, and sand between each coat except for the last. We do not sand after the 5th coat. So while your project is drying, you want to work on your marble cover. And you're going to get a blank piece of stock like this, and the first thing you should do is figure out where you want to put the holes. Now there are a couple different styles of marble cover. You can do a two-piece cover where you would drill a hole here and here and then cut down the middle, and it would open like a door, the two sides. You can do a cover where you put the hole in one corner and it'll swivel. Or, as I usually like to do, I put a hole in the middle and then it spins. So that's what I just did. I found the middle. I'm going to draw some kind of design. Your designs can vary. And what you want to do to start is you want to just draw a hole or drill a small hole through the center here. Now we'll also drill a hole in the tic-tac-toe block before we put the screw in, but in the cover too, we're going to come here, and I'm just going to come right here, and I have a countersink tool. And I'm just going to come in here with this countersink tool, and I'm going to make a countersink in the project. After this is done, we're going to go over to the blade runner, and we're just going to cut our project out. All right, over here at the blade runner, got our project. I'm going to set the height, and then I'm just going to follow the line. I'll probably go halfway and come out, turn around and go the other half. All right, so I got a piece cut out, ready to go. I'm going to go over to the vise now, and I'm just going to shape it with a file and sandpaper. So I'll see you there. And there you go. We got a decent looking cover. You can put finish on it if you want. You don't have to. I've had people decorate them, but it's all pretty decent looking, and we can go and install this on our tic-tac-toe. All right. Okay, so here we are. Got our cover, lining it up just to see. It's going to fit over the holes. So now, if you want, you can put your marbles in. And all we're going to do, I'm going to take a Phillips head screw. I'm going to put that in there where we drilled our hole. See if I can start it by hand. It doesn't look like I can. And then if you can't start it by hand, all you're going to do is you are going to start to just tighten down that Phillips head screw. And when you're done, what that's going to do is it is going to keep the marbles falling out of the tic-tac-toe block. Okay, so we got tic-tac-toe block cover on. Marbles can't come out. We can loosen it, and we can get our marbles out. And I just lost some of my marbles. So what are you going to do? Put it back on. Good shake. I can twist it all the way around. It should work both ways. Little shake, and that is how we do a marble cover. Now you got your tic-tac-toe block, marble cover, back game, whatever it may be, and you're good to go. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and I hope yours comes out as nice as this one.